All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting episode of D&D Did a Deep Dive, the show where we dive deep into classes, subclasses, and other features of 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons to help you get the most out of your choices. So, today we are going to be continuing along the path of the lingering soul by looking at the first of the subclasses for it, the Culling of the Poltergeist. Now, quick reminder, if you are new, please remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon to turn notifications on if you appreciate the stuff that I do. All of those things are really, really important to getting other people to see these videos. So that being said, we talked about the Poltergeist last week, and or not last week, last episode, a couple days ago. And the unique thing about it, quick refresher on 5th edition class design. In 5th edition D&D, every class is designed to play very, very differently right from the beginning. In order to do that, they have these things that we call defining features. A defining feature is something either unique to the class itself, or it may not be unique, but it's something that the class gets earlier than other classes, or they can use differently than other classes. And in order for something to be a defining feature, it has to show up in the first 2 levels. So, the Lingering Soul is a bit strange because due to the fact that you pick your subclass at first level, the subclass is actually going to give you one of the defining features of the class. So, and that's not always the case. Like sorcerers, their defining features have nothing to do with their subclass, but just how this class is built, the defining features is going to be partly what's in the base class and partly what's in the subclass, which means that looking at just the base class does give you kind of an incomplete picture of what the class is. But the defining feature for the base class is called possession. Effectively, you can possess another creature's body. And when I first read this, I actually read it incorrectly. And I think I prefer my incorrect reading to the actual written to the text, because the actual written text basically is, while you're inhabiting their body, you can use your action to have them make a single weapon attack against a target of your choice, or make them take the dodge action or dash. Now, the way that I initially read it was effectively you could use your action to make them take an action. Effectively meaning you could take away, or you could choose what their action was going to be, which is a huge action economy manipulator, which is really, really cool. I don't believe as written that's how it works, but I think that's how it should work. So that's how I'm going to kind of interpret the rest of the class, just because I think, first things first, the way that it's written, the dodge action is completely useless, because all it does is give your enemy a benefit by wasting your action to make all attacks against them have disadvantage. Like there's literally zero benefit to having the option to make them take the dodge action if your actions have no effect on their actions. However, if you can use your action to force them to use their action to do something, well, then taking the dodge action actually can be a really useful thing, because bare minimum it means they can't use their action for anything else, and that can be really, really helpful. Now, theoretically, taking the dodge action would be beneficial if you were possessing an ally, which one of the subclasses is actually kind of built around. But that would be the only time the dodge action, and still then it's really not a great use of your action to do that. Like, there's a lot better things that you can do with your action than just taking the dodge action for an ally. So, like I said, I like my reading of it better. I don't think it breaks the class at all. I think it makes it more interesting. So, how does that interact with the calling of the Poltergeist? Well, let's look at it and find out. Now, two things. One thing that I actually missed: when you choose your calling, you choose your aspect, which is basically the attribute that the class is dependent on. Each of the callings has different aspects or different attributes that you can choose. For the calling of the Poltergeist, you can choose either strength, dexterity, or intelligence to become your aspect. Now, something I mentioned before, you cannot multi-class as a polter or as a lingering soul. So the choice of your aspect is not going to be quite as impactful as it might be with another class where you can multi-class, simply because, like, if you chose dexterity, you might be able to multi-class into a rogue and get some sneak attack levels, or multi-class into a ranged fighter or a ranger and do some interesting stuff that way. Or if you chose intelligence, you could multi-class into wizard or artificer and get some weird interactions. That doesn't happen with the lingering soul because it quite simply cannot multi-class. So this is mostly going to be based on effectively what you want your character to kind of be good at. And theoretically, if you were replacing a dead character, you would want to pick an aspect that exemplifies what your previous character was good at from a lore perspective. For this, if you choose intelligence, you're going to be much better at, intelligence-based skill checks and things like that. You're just going to be a book smart version. Where if you go dexterity, you're going to be a little bit more agile. Like there's a lot of different ways that you can do this to kind of define how you want this character to play. And perhaps going against type might be more fun. Like maybe in life you were just this huge kind of mountain of a person. And then when you became a specter, you lose all your strength entirely, and you become very agile because you don't have the weight of all that muscle and bone and tissue weighing you down. So you now are very, very dexterous. There's a lot of different ways that you can do this. The second thing that you choose is actually, or you don't choose, you actually get an additional saving throw. If you remember, the base class itself, you only get one saving throw. That's Constitution. Your subclass will give you another, and for calling the Poltergeist, that'll be your Strength saving throw. So you have proficiency in Constitution and Strength. With the fact that this gives you proficiency in Strength saving throws, you might think that this may be a weapon-based class, but that's kind of a weird thing because Lingering Souls, by definition, the ghostly form, you can't carry any objects, you can't wield anything. Well, that's where your first ability comes in. At first level, you get Implements of Anger. Upon choosing to become a Poltergeist at first level, you gain proficiency with 3 melee weapons of your choice. You may choose 2 additional melee weapons to gain proficiency with at 6th level, 11th level, and 15th level. Lingering Souls have no proficiency in weapons whatsoever. This gives them proficiency in weapons, which still doesn't actually do anything for them because they can't wield them. As of right now, we're going to get to another ability that changes that. But one thing I did want to mention about Implements of Anger, something that I've discovered over running and playing D&D for as long as I have is you don't generally tend to switch weapons a lot in a game. Obviously, what I mean by is if you start at level 1 with a greatsword, if you play that character to level 5, you will probably still be using a greatsword of some sort. If you play it to 10, 15, 20, you're going to be using a version of the greatsword. Despite the fact that you have access to a bunch of other weapons, it is incredibly rare to see a player switch weapons over a campaign. For a number of reasons. One, you will build your class around the abilities you have, and one of the abilities you have is what weapon you can use with it. So, someone using a greatsword would actually get a lot more use out of Great Weapon Fighter, the Great Weapon fighting style, than someone using a great axe. Despite the fact that both of them are heavy two-handed weapons, because the great sword rolls 2d6 instead of the great axe, which rolls 1d12. For the great weapon fighting style, or two-handed fighting, whatever it is, you get to re-roll ones and twos on your dice. Well, you're going to be rolling a lot more ones and twos with 2d6s than you are with 1d12. So choosing that fighting style is going to mean you always have an incentive to always use a greatsword. And it goes from there. As you build your character, you will find that your choice of weapon is going to kind of help define the choices that you make. So giving classes a bunch of different choices at character selection for weapons that they can use makes perfect sense to me. I'm not saying that they should have less choices or anything like that. What I'm saying is what you choose in the beginning tends to be what you choose for the rest of the time you play that class. I'm not saying always. If you find a really cool magic weapon that you're proficient in, but it's not the one that you normally use, you might switch around. But I'm just saying it doesn't happen often. So the idea that when you get proficiency with any 3 melee weapons of your choice, that gives you a huge amount of choice, because it's not like most classes where you have proficiency with these weapons. You can choose any of these weapons. This is literally any melee weapons you want. You get to choose 3 of them that you always have proficiency with. More likely than not, you will never go outside using those 3 weapons. Like it's just, even with the next ability, you're probably never going to use weapons that aren't those 3 melee weapons. So giving additional choices at 6th, 11th, and 15th level really doesn't mean much, because while you're getting more choices, you're never using those choices. It doesn't feel good. They're like, oh wow, now I can wield spears that nobody uses. Or now I can wield a club. Oh. So yeah, I'm not saying this is a bad ability. I'm saying I see this all the time in D&D classes, just in general, like the Path of the Kensei, or the Way of the Kensei for monks. You choose a Kensei weapon at 3rd level when you choose it, and then you can pick additional ones as you go up. You're just never going to use them. And I've never seen anyone playing a Kensei that has ever used anything other than the weapons that they choose at for 1st level. It just doesn't happen. So, yeah. Anyway, moving on. Also at 1st level, you get Haunt. You're able to focus on small objects and move them with alarming speed using your phantom strength. You learn the Mage Hand cantrip. As an action, you can choose an object that weighs no more than 10 pounds within 30 feet of you. You mystically hurl it 30 feet in any direction. If you choose to have the object strike a creature, roll a ranged aspect attack against that creature. On a hit, it takes a d4 plus your aspect modifier bludgeoning damage, and the object drops to the ground. If the object is a weapon you are proficient in, which I don't know why this bothers me so much, but grammatically, that's not right. You aren't proficient in things, you are proficient with the things. So technically, the absolute correct grammatical way to write this is if the object is a weapon with which you are proficient, because you don't end statements with a prepositional phrase. A prepositional phrase has to have something that it modifies after it. I have no idea why I fixated on that, but every time I read this class, I cannot get past that without saying should be proficient with, not proficient in, I believe. I may be wrong about that, but that's my understanding of the word proficient and how it works grammatically. Anyway, if the object is a weapon with which you are proficient, Use the weapon's damage dice and type instead. Any magic weapons you're proficient with and attuned to can be used with this feature. If the target object is currently held by another creature, they must make a strength save. On a failed save, the creature drops the object you choose, and you may move it 15 feet with this feature. Upon reaching 6th level, you can target and move 2 objects when you take the haunt action instead of 1. Alternatively, you can move a single object twice in rapid succession, allowing 2 attacks with a single weapon or object. So there's a lot here that basically boils down to the Poltergeist can make weapon attacks. That's basically what it is. And again, normally I'm the person that says, don't complicate things that don't need to be complicated. 5th edition is entirely against complexity for complexity's sake. This is not any more complicated than it needs to be. This would be super easy to abuse, and it's just not. Everything in there has to be in there. And yeah, it effectively means that you can make melee attacks. However, the interesting thing about this is you can make melee attacks with any melee weapon that you're proficient with up to 30 feet away. So you can make ranged melee attacks with this class, which is really cool. The 6th level thing is basically just giving you extra attack. Extra attack is essential in 5th edition for action economy. Any melee-based class needs extra attack unless they are the rogue, where all of their damage is done in a single attack. For any other class, you need that extra attack. Otherwise, action economy-wise, you start doing really, really poorly. So that's all that is. The other thing that's really, really interesting about this is the ability to basically disarm someone with a strength save. Sorry, it's something. Anyway, I had I snack on almonds, and every so often you just get that little piece, and it annoys the hell out of me. Anyway, this ability to effectively disarm creatures. Now, I've mentioned before, the act of disarming a foe in 5th edition seems like it should be useful, and it generally isn't because of the free object interaction thing that you can do. Every turn, you get a free object interaction, which can be picking a weapon up off the floor or drawing it. Because of that, if you disarm someone, unless you move it, there is nothing nothing changes about their next turn. They just pick it up and attack you with it. There's no change whatsoever. With this, it allows you to disarm them and move the object 15 feet, which actually does change things rather dramatically. That's why I believe the Battlemaster fighter has a disarm ability that allows them to knock it. Before I say this wrong, I'm going to look, because I've got the darn thing here, fighter, and I love Battlemasters anyways, because they're super cool. There's a disarm, right? Disarming attack. Nope. Disarming attack just makes the object land at its feet. So yeah. But this is going to be significantly better than a disarming attack, because again, it forces it up to 15 feet away, which doesn't seem like much. Any creature can move 15 feet, but depending on which 15 feet away you do, that can mean they have to leave the attack range of an ally, so that you can get so they can get an opportunity attack. It could be that they have to move to this place, and then trying to move back, they just won't have enough movement to be able to make the attacks that they want. Like, there's a lot you can do with the ability to disarm a creature and move its weapon 15 feet away. I think any disarming ability should, by definition, include moving it 15 feet, just because otherwise the disarming action is a completely pointless, wasted action, because it doesn't change anything in combat. It's the same thing as, oh, well, this ability allows you to turn them purple. Well, does that change anything? Nope. then what's the point of turning them purple? Well, it looked cool. Well, yeah, rule of cool is always awesome, but if you're going to make them waste an action doing something, it needs to have a mechanical benefit. So, all in all, I like Haunt. I think it's interesting. Um, One thing that it doesn't deal with, and this is kind of the issue I have with the Poltergeist in general, is the fact that when you look at consume enchantment, that is, again, it's not a defining ability of the class because you don't get it until the third level. However, it is a wholly unique ability for the lingering soul. Wow, brain just went. Basically, what consume enchantment is you can take a magic item and like suck the enchantment out of it, and make it just a part of you. And specifically, it says a weapon enchantment you have consumed can be applied to any physical or weapon attack you make. If you are possessing a host, you can apply one of your consumed weapon enchantments to any attacks you force them to make with a non-magical weapon. And that's where the issue starts to become an issue. If you're possessing a host, you can't really break these two interactions because it specifically says you can apply one of your consumed weapon enchantments to any attack, and force them to make a non-magical weapon attack. So the broken thing that could happen here is theoretically you could pick up a flame tongue weapon. Flame tongue weapon does additional damage per hit. You could have absorbed another flame tongue weapon, or maybe a frostbrand weapon, or a sun sword. And so what would happen is anytime you made an attack with this flame tongue weapon, you could also add the sun sword or the other flame tongue, and basically double the amount of damage each time you would attack, which becomes broken very quickly, especially if you start absorbing multiple weapon things. Because again, as it is written here, it just says a weapon enchantment you have consumed can be applied to any physical or weapon attack you make. It doesn't say only one. It just says a weapon enchantment you you have consumed can be applied. And it doesn't mention anything about magic weapons. So the one change that I would make with this is I would put the same restrictions on the possessed attacks as regular attacks for the Poltergeist, because the Poltergeist is the only one that can do this. None of the other subclasses can, but the Poltergeist specifically could become very, very broken very quickly by just absorbing. You can absorb up to 5 enchantments. If they absorbed 5 different weapon enchantments, or even just 5 of the same weapon enchantment, they would be able to do crazy amounts of damage at range, with very, very little downside to it. So, yeah. Now, one other thing I do have to mention, a specific thing about the Call of the Poltergeist is it does not interact with possession in any way. And that's because you can only use features that specify their use while possessing a host. That's part of possession. So anything that doesn't specifically say you can use it while you're possessing someone, you can't. So Haunt, you can't use while you are possessing a host. So this is where the actual choice for this class comes from. Talk about this all the time in this series, but sorry, very parched. I talk about this all the time in this series, but in good game design, you are given choices where there really isn't a definitive right answer every single time. There might be certain abilities that are going to be more useful in certain situations, but they're not always the right answer. Bad class design will give you a right and a wrong answer every single time, where it doesn't matter what you do, this choice is always going to produce the better result. The choice for the Poltergeist is it going to be more beneficial for me to possess a host, which has its own set of benefits? You get to use the weapon that the host has, or you can use a dash action and get them attacked a bunch of times. You actually take half damage whenever you're inside of host, and only when the host takes the damage. So, when the enemy is casting fireball and stuff like that, there's a good chance they're not going to cast it on one of their own allies. So there are definite benefits to possessing a host. However, when you're possessing a host, you cannot haunt, which is kind of the defining aspect of the Poltergeist. And possession is effectively one and done per creature. Once a possession ends on a creature, or if they resist it, they're immune to possession for 24 hours, which is a lot longer than your combat is ever going to last. And in general, it's unbelievably rare to ever have a character last, or a creature appear in more than one combat encounter with your party. Generally, that's reserved for big bag BBEGs and other important NPCs. So, haunt is effectively what you're going to do when you're not possessing, and making that choice of, is it more beneficial for me to possess, or is it more beneficial for me to make attacks and things like that, is almost never going to have a 100% right answer. There are pluses and minuses to both things, and I like that. I think that's how any class should be made. You should never be given a right and a wrong answer. You should be going, okay, there's benefits and bad things that happen no matter what I do. I just have to choose which benefits I think are the most beneficial and for my specific plan right now. So, yeah. Moving forward, after I get a drink. Alright, so, moving forward. At 6th level, you get Spectral Warrior. As a bonus action, select any pieces of wearable equipment within 30 feet that aren't currently being worn by a creature. The equipment is drawn into the air and assembles around you, bestowing you with any armor class bonuses, benefits, and detriments granted by wearing the equipment. You need not be proficient with any armor to wear it in this way, and you ignore the strength requirements of heavy armor. Any magical equipment you are attuned to can be used with this feature. You're still limited by equipment slots, 1 helmet, 1 set of boots, etc. This equipment remains assembled around you until you choose to drop it. If you attempt to possess a creature, you pass through a solid creature or object, or until you take a short or long rest. Equipment dropped is immediately left on the ground in your space. So effectively, Spectral Warrior means Poltergeist can wear armor. And this one is actually written pretty well in the fact that the only magic armor you can wear any piece of wearable equipment. No. This presents another kind of interesting dilemma, which is when you combine this with consume enchantment. Well, how does it work with armor? Let's say your party has found 2 sets of +1 leather armor, and nobody needs it. Everyone else has, bare minimum, they have like studded leather, which is effectively the same thing. Armor class wise, studded leather and +1 regular leather armor have the same armor class. So you decide to absorb both, or consume both, and now you have 2 +1 enhancements to your armor, despite the fact that that's not possible to do for any other character. Then you find a +1 full plate armor. Well, with Spectral Warrior, you can put on the +1 full plate, which means your base armor class is 19 at that point. And then since you've consumed 2 other +1s to your armor class, now you have a 21 armor class, despite the fact that you really don't have anything that would give you that kind of armor class anyway. And that's the one issue I have with this Spectral Warrior is there's nothing in this that says that you can't combine um, consume enchantment with your with the equipment that you're wearing. Um, I get the I get the thing behind this. Basically, the Poltergeist is the one um, subclass that can use magic weapons and magic armor like every other class. And the Poltergeist is generally supposed to act the closest to a more traditional class. However, I think with Spectral Warrior, you already have the ability to absorb enchantments, and you are limited by number of enchantments. Now, the attune thing still works. Like, you can only attune to 3 things, and consuming an enchantment attunes you to it. So that is still a limitation that is built into 5th edition itself. But any non-attunable armor, you can just consume if you have extra consume slots effectively. And you have 5. And I've mentioned this before. In 5th edition, magic items are supposed to be relatively rare, especially compared to earlier editions. If you watched from Daily December, if you watched one of the last episodes where I leveled up the Warlord to level 11 so I could show off Paragon paths. One of the things I mentioned was in 4th edition, magic items were so common that if you built a character above level 1, you always gave them 3 magic items. And you were expected, like 4th edition and 3rd edition as well, were kind of built around the idea that you're constantly finding new magic items to the point where you can't actually hit targets at higher levels unless you have a magic item. Like, it's just physically impossible. 4th edition actually had specific rules in place if you didn't want to use magic items that would just inherently increase your attack and your AC and all these things, because magic items were so essential to the game that you literally couldn't play it at higher levels without them. And by higher levels, I mean above like level 3 or 4. So it's not even high levels, it's above level 1. 5th edition was not designed that. You can actually go an entire campaign without using magic items. They are not necessary for the game to play. You can still, just with your base attack bonuses, you can hit everything in the game. Your armor classes can be high enough to defend you from any attacks you need to. You don't need magic items. That's why the attunement rule was built into it, to kind of limit people from going crazy with magic items, because too many magic items will break 5th edition. Magic items are meant to be very rare, and because of that, they are very powerful in 5th edition. With Spectral Warrior and Haunt and Consume Enchantment, you start getting to the point where the Calling of the Poltergeist starts to become pretty broken, because you can combine enchantments that are physically impossible to combine any other way. The one change I would make to Spectral Warrior would be if you have consumed a magic item that would normally fit in an equipment slot, you have to choose either the consumed magic item or the armor piece you're wearing. You can't use both. That would be the only modification I would make to this, to keep this from becoming super broken. The class is already really interesting and already has a lot of stuff going for it, that it doesn't need the ability to stack enchantments and buffs into the things like that. That would just completely break the class. All right. I am absolutely parched. So, moving to 11th level, you get Phantasmic Force. As an action, you can choose a creature that is large or smaller within 30 feet of you. Target must make a strength save or be hurled 30 feet in any direction, including upward. If the target comes into contact with a hard surface, creature, or heavy object, the target takes 1d8 bludgeoning damage per 10 feet moved and is knocked prone. If the target creature is hurled into a secondary creature within range, the second creature must make a dex save. The second creature also takes 1d8 bludgeoning damage per 10 feet moved and is knocked prone on a failed save, or half as much damage, and is not knocked prone on a successful one. You use this feature a number of times equal to your aspect modifier. You gain any expended uses when you finish a short or long rest. Okay, this is just fun. So effectively, you can throw people around as long as they're large or smaller. So a lot of big bad end guys, you're not going to be able to do this to. But someone like Strahd, ragdoll him around, and you can throw them. So there's a lot here. And you're going to want to understand exactly all the different things that can happen. So you can move them straight up. Fall damage in 5th edition is for every 10 feet, you take a d6 of fall damage. So moving something straight up and then dropping it 30 feet is going to do 3d6 damage, which is nice, but it's not going to be as much as the 3d8 you could do if you can move it a full 30 feet and impact something. What gets really interesting is when you start combining things. Like you can't, if the ceiling in the room is 30 feet high, this is a perfect thing. You move them 30 feet, so they take 3d8 damage and they fall and take 3d6 damage. That's really, really nice. In most dungeons, it's 10 feet ceilings. So you could do 1d8 plus 1d6. That's not as good. Or move it 30 feet in a direction and have it crash into a wall, and it takes 3d8 damage. Running it into an enemy, as long as it moves at least 10 feet, you're effectively doubling the damage you do, because each creature is going to take a d8 of damage per 10 foot moved. And the only limitation you have is if they make the dex save, they don't take any damage, and that might also mean that your target doesn't take any damage as well. So as an attack, there is a ton here you can do, but you need to understand what can and can't happen. If you use this ability and you choose an enemy to try and knock them into each other, that's great, but if they make their save, neither target's going to take damage. So this can do absolutely nothing but move the target. And that's the other thing about this is a control-based ability as well. In addition to, actually doing damage with this ability, you can move the target around and you can put them exactly where you want them to be. Now, it's forced movement, so it doesn't trigger things like opportunity attacks, like using the dash action for the creature would provoke opportunity attacks, but it does allow for you to move targets around, and again, depending on the makeup of your party, that might be really, really useful. Moving a creature into your cleric's spirit minions, or whatever it's called, where they just have an aura of death around them, that can be really useful. They won't take any damage when you move them, but when they start their turn there, they will take damage. Or moving a creature outside of the effect of some sort of buff or preventative measure. Nothing about this is magical, by the way. So this is not something that can be counterspelled. This is not something that can be prevented by a beholder's eye ray. A beholder itself, I believe, is only a large creature. So you could use this on a beholder and literally just turn them around and push them into a wall, so that their center eye is no longer focused on anyone in your party. And that would make a huge benefit. So there's a lot that can be done with this. I like the fact that it does have some limitations, and it is shorter long rest. The only thing I'm less than thrilled about it, and this is just because the game has evolved since this was written, they tie it to the aspect modifier. At 11th level, that means you get 5 uses. That's what it's going to be. Your aspect modifier is going to be 20 by level 11. It has to be. That is your most important thing. So there's no point in saying tying it to your aspect modifier. I prefer tie it to the proficiency bonus because that means as you gain levels, it gets better, no matter what. Anytime you tie it to an ability modifier, that means generally by level 8, it is as powerful as it is ever going to be. So that's the only thing I would change about it is tie it to the... It also means you get one more use of it at high levels, which I think is fine. Finally, at 15th level, you get Torrent of Rage. As an action, you begin calling surrounding debris to spiral and orbit you at incredible speeds. Whenever an enemy creature comes within 30 feet of you for the first time on a turn, or starts its turn within 30 feet of you, it immediately suffers 1d6 slashing damage, 1d6 piercing damage, and 1d6 bludgeoning damage. This feature lasts for up to 1 minute. Once you use this feature again, you must finish a long rest before you can use it again. So, as a 15th level ability, this is kind of cool. There's quite a few things about this. First things first, whenever an enemy creature comes within 30 feet of you, that means this is never going to affect your allies. It does 3d6 damage every turn, and there's no save for it. This is guaranteed to the damage. So this is something that's really, really useful for dealing with casters. Again, the big balancing aspect of 5th edition Magic is concentration. The most powerful spells in 5th edition require concentration. Anytime you take damage, you have to make a concentration check. So using Torrent of Rage and being near enough to casters that they'll start their turn, the first thing they do on their turn is they immediately take damage and make a concentration check. And then just 3d6 damage at 15th level, 3d6 damage per turn is a decent amount of damage, especially since it's never damage your allies are going to take. It's always going to be the enemy. And there's nothing that says this ends. Just says it lasts for a minute. So it doesn't matter if they hit you or stun you or anything like that. This keeps going for a full minute. Because of that, it is a one and done ability. Again, I'm generally not a huge fan of one and dones because most players will just never use them because like, oh, it's the elixir problem is what I refer to it. The elixir dilemma, which is basically in games like Final Fantasy, there are items called elixirs, which give you full hit points, full magic points, but there's a limited amount in the game. You can't buy them anywhere. They don't drop for anything. There's only a set number of them in the entire Giga game. So most players just won't use them because they're like, oh, what if I need this later? What if I need this for the big baddie at the end? And so after they beat the final boss, they'll have 7 elixirs in their inventory because they never use them. It's like, well, what if I need it later? And that's what you generally tend to see with one and done abilities is they'll go, well, what if I need it later? What if, I have a more important fight later on that needs more damage or there's more enemies in the next fight and I'll do more damage then? People end up just never using them or using them so sparingly that it's not fun. So with how much damage this does and everything, I would say just giving it 2 uses instead of 1 will not break anything. I don't think this is a massively overpowered thing that would justify it being a one and done ability. And just by giving it 2 uses instead of 1, people will use it not just double the amount that they would have used it before. Because there's 2 instead of 1, they don't feel as bad as about using the last one as they do about using the only one. So, yeah. Final thoughts. Overall, the Calling of the Poltergeist, for me personally, I think the Calling of the Poltergeist is probably the most boring of the 3 subclasses for this. That's not to say it's not a cool class or one that or subclass or one that I wouldn't want to play. I think it's really cool, and I think it could be a ton of fun. I'm saying that because the other two subclasses are just that much cooler. Overall, I think there needs to be some wording changes and some limitation put on a couple of the abilities, specifically Haunt and Spectral Warrior, to prevent players from just binging on consume magic item and then becoming these unstoppable juggernauts that do tons of damage. But that's really the only things about this that need adjusting. And again, that's pretty impressive for a class that has only ever had one adjustment. Again, this is the version I have is the 1.1 version, which with how Matt releases his stuff, he will do 1 point, and then any revision is 0.1, 0.2, 0.3. So this was published, I think, like 5 or 6 years ago. This was published when the DMs Guild first came out. I think shortly after I published my Dragon Knight class. So they're about the same age. And my Dragon Knight class has had 6 revisions. This has only had 1, and it came out, if I remember correctly, it came out relatively quickly after the class came out, where it was just a quick, oh, I missed a few things. So the fact that this has only been revised once in like 6 years is a pretty big deal, that it works so well. And it definitely is a commentary on just how good Matt was and still is at designing character options. Like he designed some pretty solid stuff. Anyway, that's he's gonna be all for me today. As always, again, like, subscribe, turn notifications on in the comments down below. What do you think of the Poltergeist, and what do you think would be the most hilarious use of Phantasmic Force? What do you think would be just the most fun thing you could do, hurling someone and ragdolling them around the battlefield? Let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, again, that's all for me today. I'll see you guys in the next time, all right? Bye-bye.